Welcome to the Raising Confident Girls podcast, your guide to raising strong, confident daughters. I'm Melissa Jones, the founder of Girls Positivity Club and a teacher for over 20 years. In a world where girls often feel overwhelmed, anxious, and confused, this podcast is your go-to space. As caregivers, we navigate challenges together. I founded Girls Positivity Club to provide a place where you belong and get the tools to face today's hurdles. Consider this your regular check-in with a trusted friend, offering insights and practical tips for meaningful conversations. I'm here to help you feel confident on this journey of raising a generation of empowered girls. Let's dive in and raise those confident girls together. Hi everybody, it's Melissa. I wanted to talk to you about a friendship moment that I think can be surprisingly hard to watch as a parent. Your daughter has that friend. The one whose name you've heard 1,000 times. She's been in your car, she's been at your house, maybe you've packed snacks for their sleepovers, driven them back and forth to activities, listened to the stories about things the two of them thought were absolutely hilarious, you didn't completely understand. And for a while, when your daughter talked about doing something, you almost automatically assumed this friend would be part of it. They were best friends. And then one day your daughter says something like, "We're still friends. We're just not as close anymore." Or, "She's always with someone else now." Maybe it's, "She never asks me to do anything anymore." Or maybe your daughter doesn't say much at all. You just notice. Her name doesn't come up as often. They're not together as much. And eventually you do find yourself asking, "Are you and so-and-so okay?" And your daughter says, "Yeah," but you can tell something feels different. And as her parent, there may be a part of you thinking, "But I thought you two were best friends. What happened? Was there a fight? Is she being left out? Should I encourage her to call her? Or should I call the mom? Should I stay out of it?" Sometimes there is an obvious answer, but after almost 3 decades of working with girls, I've learned that some of the hardest friendship changes to understand are the ones where nobody necessarily did anything wrong. And when I was teaching, I had a perspective parents rarely get to have. I got to see both girls. I remember girls who had been best friends for years and had always been placed in the same classroom. And then one year they weren't. Suddenly, they were spending most of the school day with completely different groups of kids. And then recess would come. One girl had spent the entire morning getting to know the girls in her class, and she wanted to play with them. Meanwhile, her best friend had been waiting all morning thinking, "Finally, now I get to be with her." Same friendship, same recess, completely different expectations. One girl was essentially saying, "I still want you to be my best friend. I just want to play with these other girls too." And the other was saying, "But if I'm your best friend, why don't you want to play with me?" And I saw another version of this when both girls were in my classroom. Two girls could be incredibly close, and then one of them would start connecting with other girls in class. Maybe she chose someone else as her partner. Maybe she wanted to play with somebody different at recess. And suddenly there were hurt feelings. Even if those two best friends had been partners all morning, they'd spent a lot of time together, one of the girls would still want to spend the entire recess with her. Sometimes it was possessiveness. Sometimes an argument that looked like it was about who was going to be partners for one activity, but really wasn't about the activity at all. And when I would sit down with those girls and help them talk through what was actually happening, so often I discovered that neither girl wanted the friendship to end. One was just saying, "I still want you to be my best friend. I just want room for other friendships too." And the other was saying, "I'm still your best friend. Why don't you want to play with me?" Both girls cared about the friendship. Both girls could be hurt by what was happening. but they had different expectations of what being best friends was supposed to mean. And if you have older girls and you're listening, it may not be play with her, it might be hang out. It might be they have different classes. When they switch classes, they don't see each other this semester as much. And that's something I think we can easily miss as moms is them having different expectations of what this best friendship means to each of them. Because when our daughter comes home and says, she's always with somebody else now, we only have one window into what happened, our daughters. And of course, that's a window we care most about because we love her. When she hurts, we hurt. But one of the things those years of sitting with girls on both sides taught me is that sometimes the question isn't what went wrong. Sometimes the better question is, what does each girl need from this friendship right now? Because maybe your daughter is the girl who desperately misses the closeness they used to have. Maybe she's the girl who started wanting a little more space. Maybe she's making new friends and feeling guilty because her best friend is hurt. Or maybe you don't quite know what's happening yet. So today, I want to give you 5 ways to help when your daughter's closest friendship starts to feel different, without immediately trying to save it, without telling her just to move on, and without assuming that because the friendship is changing, it must be ending. Because a friendship can change without either girl automatically becoming the bad friend. And helping our daughters understand what's actually happening can completely change what they do next. So, the first thing I want you to do might actually be one of the hardest. Don't decide what the change means before you understand what's happening. Let's say your daughter gets in the car and says, she's always hanging out with Emma now. Our mom brains are fast. Before our daughter has even finished the sentence, we can already be thinking, she's being left out. She's been replaced. That wasn't very nice. And we might immediately say, why don't you ask her what's going on? Or, well, she shouldn't be treating you that way. Or maybe we go in the opposite direction. I'm sure she still likes you. Don't worry about it. But we don't actually know yet what our daughter is trying to tell us. Maybe she's devastated. Maybe she's a little jealous and she knows it. Maybe she likes Emma too, but she's having a hard time adjusting to sharing a friendship that used to feel like it belonged only to the two of them. Maybe nothing particularly hurtful has happened, and she's simply noticing that the dynamic is different. Or maybe there really is something happening in the friendship that deserves our attention. But we won't know if we decide what the story is before we understand it. So instead of immediately explaining, reassuring, or solving, you might try, it sounds like things feel different between you two lately. How does that feel to you? And then listen. Listen without interrupting, without giving advice. I know it's the hardest thing to do sometimes because maybe we do have good advice, but they need us more than anything just to listen. Because she might say, I don't care, I've been hanging out with other people too. Okay, so that tells you something. She might say, I just miss her. It tells you something completely different. She might say, I'm mad because she only talks to me when Emma isn't there. Now there may be something else we need to look at. Or she might say, I don't know. And that's okay too. You don't have to figure out the entire friendship in one car ride. The goal isn't to convince her that nothing is wrong. And it isn't immediately to confirm that something is wrong. It's to understand what she's experiencing. Because before we can help our daughters decide what to do about a changing friendship, we have to understand what the change actually means to them. And sometimes just giving her the space to figure that out is the first way we can help. The second thing I want you to do is help your daughter figure out what she was actually expecting from this friendship. Because one of the things I learned from all those conversations with girls is that two girls can use the exact same words. She's my best friend, and mean completely different things by them. For one girl, best friend might be we choose each other first. We play together at recess. We're partners whenever we can be. We tell each other everything. For another girl, best friend might mean, of course you're my best friend, but I can have other close friends too. I don't need to sit beside you every day. I might choose someone else as my partner sometimes. That doesn't change how I feel about you. And neither girl may have actually ever said any of this out loud. They just assume the other girl understands friendship the same way they do. Or they may think that their best friend has the exact same expectations as they do, too. And this may happen until something happens that shows them that she doesn't. That's what I saw so often in the classroom when I was teaching. The argument might have sounded like, you always pick her instead of me. And the other girl would say, I don't always pick her. And suddenly we're arguing about how many times someone chose someone else as a partner. But underneath that, one girl might really be asking, am I still important to you? And the other girl might be saying, why do I have to prove you're important to me by choosing you every single time? That's a very different conversation. And this doesn't only happen with younger girls. As girls get older, the expectations change, but the disconnect can still be there. I've seen this with middle school girls too. I think about a friendship where the girls considered each other best friends, but one of them really craved a deeper relationship. She wanted to talk about things that mattered to her. She wanted to feel like she could count on this friend. If she texted her something important, she wanted to know that the friend would respond. And her friend just didn't approach the friendship with the same need for depth. She was more comfortable keeping things lighter. If she didn't respond to a text, it wasn't necessarily because she was angry or intentionally ignoring her friend. Sometimes she'd genuinely say she hadn't seen it. But for the girl who was craving that deeper connection, it hurt. Because what she wanted from a best friend and what the other girl was naturally giving in that friendship weren't the same thing. I think this is where we can help our daughters tremendously. Not by deciding she's a bad friend, and not by saying you're expecting too much, but by helping our daughter get clearer about what she's actually missing. Because there's a difference between she's hanging out with other people, and I don't like it, and I don't feel like I can count on her anymore. There's a difference between she chose someone else as her partner today, and she repeatedly leaves me out when certain girls get around. There's a difference between I wish we spent more time together and I don't feel like I can be myself with her anymore. Those differences matter. So if your daughter tells you a friendship doesn't feel the same, you might gently ask, what do you miss most about how it used to be? I really like that question. Because listen to what her answer might tell you. We used to do everything together. Okay, maybe she's missing time and closeness. I used to be able to tell her anything. That's different. She always chooses everybody else now. Okay, let's understand what always means and what's happening around those moments. Or maybe, I don't know, I just don't feel as close to her anymore. That's information too. And you don't have to immediately do anything with the answer or solve it or give her advice. And I know that's the most tempting thing to do as parents. Sometimes simply helping your daughter name what she misses helps her understand why this friendship change is hurting so much. Because here's something I want our girls to eventually learn. Wanting something from a friendship doesn't automatically mean the other person is able or obligated to give it in the exact way that we want. That's a hard lesson for adults too, by the way. We can really care about someone and discover that we have different capacities for closeness, different communication styles, different needs for time together, different ways of showing that a relationship matters. And sometimes those differences can be worked through. Sometimes the girls can talk about them and find a little more room for each other. But sometimes the difference tells us something important about what the friendship can realistically be. And that's why I don't want your daughter to immediately conclude she doesn't care about me. And I don't want her to immediately conclude I'm too needy. Maybe neither of those things is true. Maybe she's simply discovering I want something from this friendship that feels important to me, and I'm not sure my friend wants or is able to meet me there. And once she understands that, then we can help her figure out what comes next. Now, I want to stop here for a minute because I can almost hear what some of you might be thinking. Okay, Melissa, I understand that two girls can have different expectations. I understand that one girl may want more closeness and another may want more space. But what if my daughter really is being treated poorly? That's different. And I don't ever want us to become so understanding of everyone else's perspective that we teach our daughters to explain away behavior that is repeatedly hurting them. There's a difference between your daughter's best friend wanting to spend time with other people and only coming back to your daughter when nobody else is available. There's a difference between choosing another partner sometimes and intentionally excluding your daughter or making sure she knows she wasn't chosen. There's a big difference between not being a big texter and repeatedly ignoring your daughter while expecting her to be available whenever she wants something. There's a difference between needing space and using withdrawal or silence to control the friendship. Different friendship needs are one thing. A pattern that continually leaves your daughter feeling small, insecure, used, or like she has to earn her place is something else. And that's where I want you to help your daughter look at the pattern, not just one moment, because one moment can really hurt. Her friend chooses somebody else as her partner. She doesn't get invited to something. A text goes unanswered. Her friend wants to spend recess with somebody else. Your daughter is allowed to be disappointed by that. But one painful moment doesn't necessarily tell us the whole story of a friendship. So instead of immediately asking, is she being a good friend to you? Which can be a really hard question for a girl to answer when she loves this person. Help her look for what happens over time. You might ask, how do you usually feel after you're with her? Do you feel like you can be yourself around her? When something matters to you, do you feel like she cares? Do both of you get to have other friends? Or do you feel like you're usually the one trying to keep the friendship going? You don't need to ask all of those at once. This is not a friendship evaluation form. You're just helping her step back far enough to see something that's really hard to see when you're right in the middle of it. And I think that's especially important with a best friend. Because when a girl's afraid she's losing someone who has been really important to her, she may start working harder to hold on to the friendship. She texts again. She asks again. She changes what she wants to do. She tries harder to be included. She starts paying attention to who her friend is sitting with, talking to, texting, choosing. And pretty soon, instead of asking, do I feel good in this friendship? She's asking, what do I need to do to make sure she still chooses me? That's a very different place to be. And as her mom, you may see that before she does. This is where I don't think we need to tell our daughters she's not a real friend. or you're done with her. Because ultimately, we want our daughters to learn how to recognize these things for themselves. You might say, I've noticed you've been really worried lately about whether she's upset with you or whether she's going to choose someone else. How has this friendship been feeling to you? Or it seems like you're doing a lot of work to keep this friendship going. Does it feel that way to you too? And then listen without giving advice. Because there's something we want our daughters to learn that goes far beyond this one best friend. Healthy friendship has room for both people, room for both girls to have other friends, room for different interests, room to say no sometimes, room to have a bad day, room to disagree, room to grow, and room for both people to feel like they matter. That doesn't mean friendship is always perfectly equal. It won't be. There will be seasons when one friend needs more support. There will be missed texts and misunderstandings and hurt feelings. There will be times when one girl reaches out more than the other. We're not asking our daughters to keep score. We're helping them notice whether over time the friendship has space for them too. Because understanding why someone behaves a certain way doesn't mean your daughter has to keep accepting behavior that hurts her. She can have empathy for another girl and still have boundaries. She can understand maybe she needs more space than I do. And also say, but I don't want a friendship where I only matter when it's convenient. She can understand maybe she doesn't want the same depth of friendship that I do. And also recognize then I may need to stop expecting this particular friendship to give me something it can't give me. And that doesn't necessarily require some big friendship breakup. Sometimes it simply means seeing the relationship more clearly. Maybe this girl is still her friend. Maybe she still cares about her. Maybe they do still have fun together. But perhaps your daughter stops putting all of her emotional energy into trying to make that friendship feel like it used to. And that brings us to one of the hardest questions. If she still cares about this friendship, should she keep trying? And I think the answer is often yes. But there's a really important difference between reaching towards someone you care about and chasing someone to choose you. And that's what I want to talk about next. So now let's say your daughter has figured out, I do miss her. I do still care about this friendship. I would like us to be closer again. What do you want to do with that? Do you encourage her to reach out? Do you tell her to give the friend space? Do you worry if she texts again, she's chasing someone who clearly doesn't want to be her friend? This is one of those places where I think our mom instincts can pull us in two completely different directions. Because part of us wants to say, just text her and ask her to do something. Maybe she's waiting for you too. And another part of us wants to protect our daughter and say, no, if she wanted to hang out with you, she'd ask. Don't keep putting yourself out there. But I don't think either one of those needs to be an automatic response. I do think that instead, I want to help our daughters learn the difference between reaching toward friendship and chasing someone to choose them. Because those are not the same thing. Reaching says, I care about you. The friendship matters to me. I'm willing to make an effort. So maybe your daughter sends the text. I feel like we haven't hung out in forever. Do you want to go do something this weekend? Maybe she walks over at lunch. Maybe she asks her friend if everything is okay. Maybe depending on the relationship and her age, she's able to say, I feel like things have been different between us lately, and I miss you. There's nothing weak about that. And I also want to emphasize that a lot of times girls are very scared to ask that question or to be that vulnerable and acknowledge that something is different. In fact, I think we can become so focused on teaching our daughters not to chase people that we accidentally teach them not to be vulnerable. Healthy relationships require people to reach toward each other. And there can be that fear of rejection. I've heard it from so many girls. They don't say anything because they're afraid of their response and they don't want to be abandoned by their friends. Sometimes somebody has to text first. Somebody has to say, I miss hanging out with you. Somebody has to ask, are we okay? Somebody has to be willing to risk hearing an answer she may not completely want to hear. That is part of friendship. But here's where reaching starts to become something different. Your daughter reaches out and gets very little back. She reaches out again and again. She's always the one asking, always the one checking, always the one trying to figure out whether something is wrong. Maybe the friend says no to plans but never suggests another time. Maybe your daughter notices that she gets included when certain people aren't available. Maybe she spends more time worrying about the friendship than actually enjoying it. And slowly the question changes from how can I care for this friendship to what else can I do to make her choose me? That's where I want us to pay attention. Because I don't want our daughters learning that caring deeply about someone means they have to keep auditioning for a place in that person's life. And as a mom, this can be so hard to watch because you may see it before she does. You see her checking her phone. You know she sent the last 3 texts. You hear her making excuses. Oh, she's just really busy. She probably forgot. Maybe she didn't see it. And maybe all those things are true. That's why I don't want you counting texts or keeping score. This isn't, she texted 3 times and her friend only texted twice, therefore the friendship is unhealthy. That's not real life. What we're looking for is the pattern. Is there some movement back toward your daughter? Does this friend ever initiate? If she can't get together, does she ever say, I can't Saturday, but what about next weekend? When they're together, does your daughter still feel wanted there? Does she leave feeling connected? Or does she leave wondering whether she did enough to keep the friendship? And this is where you may want so badly to tell her what you can already see. Honey, stop texting her. She's showing you she doesn't care. You deserve better friends than this. And sometimes you may absolutely need to step in more directly, especially if there's repeated cruelty or harmful behavior. But in many of these changing friendships, I want our daughters to begin seeing the pattern themselves. You might say, I know you really miss her, and I know you've been trying to connect or to reconnect. What are you noticing about how she's responding? Or do you feel like she's reaching toward you too? That's such an important question. Is she reaching toward you too? Not exactly the same moment, not every single time, but is there something coming back? Because friendship doesn't have to be perfectly 50-50, but it does need 2 people. And if your daughter begins to realize, I'm the one trying to make this what it used to be, that's going to hurt. We don't need to rush her past that hurt. And we don't need to make the other girl terrible in order to make our daughter accept what she's seeing. Maybe that girl cares about her very much. Maybe she still considers your daughter a friend. She simply may not want the same level of closeness anymore. And your daughter cannot force that. That's painful, but it's also a really important thing to learn. She can invite closeness. She cannot demand it. She can reach. She can communicate. She can tell someone that the relationship matters to her. She can make an effort, but she shouldn't have to continually convince someone that she's worth choosing. And if you've ever watched your daughter do that, you know how badly you want to take that hurt away from her. But maybe instead of taking it away, we can help her learn to recognize I reached toward someone I care about. I gave the friendship a chance. And now I can pay attention to whether she's reaching. That's not giving up on friendship. That's learning what reciprocity feels like. And it also doesn't mean your daughter has to dramatically announce, we're not friends anymore. Maybe she simply stops trying so hard to make the friendship be something it isn't right now. She can still say hello. She can still care about this girl. They may spend time together. They might even become closer again later. Changing the amount of energy you put into a friendship isn't the same thing as declaring the friendship is over. Sometimes it's simply making room to see what happens when you're no longer the one holding it together. And that room matters. Because while your daughter has been looking so closely at the friend who isn't reaching back, there may be someone else in her life who already is. And that's exactly what I want to talk about in the fifth and final tip. If your daughter is really focused on a friendship that's changing, help her gently begin to notice the relationships that are growing around her. Help her notice who is reaching toward her. And I want to be really careful with how we do this. Because if your daughter is sitting beside you saying, I just miss her, this is probably not the moment to say, well, what about Sophie? She's always asking you to do things. Or you have plenty of other friends. Or the one I think we sometimes say because we're desperately trying to make our daughters feel better, you'll make new friends. All of those things may be true, but in that moment, your daughter isn't asking you to prove that other people like her. She's telling you she misses that particular person. And we can let that matter. She can miss what the friendship used to be. She can wish things were different. She can feel sad that someone who once felt like her person doesn't feel quite as close anymore. And at the same time, she can stay open to the people who are reaching toward her now. Those two things can exist together. And I think that's really important. Because sometimes when a girl feels like she's losing closeness with one person, her attention becomes completely fixed on that relationship. Did she text me? Who is she sitting with? Why didn't she ask me? Who did she partner with? Is she mad at me? Does she like her better than me? And when we're watching so closely for the person who seems to be pulling away, sometimes we miss the people that are moving closer to her. Maybe there's a girl who always seems happy to see her, someone she keeps laughing with at practice, someone who saves her a seat, someone she talks to in class, someone who has invited her to do something a couple of times. Maybe it's not someone your daughter thinks of as a best friend, at least not yet. But there's something easy there, something mutual, something that doesn't require quite so much wondering. And this is where I think about that middle school girl I told you about earlier. She wanted a deeper connection with her best friend than that best friend seemed able to give her. So she wanted more communication, more emotional depth. She wanted to feel like she could count on her, and she couldn't force that. But over time, another friendship started developing, and this one felt different. This friend had a busy schedule, so they couldn't always be together. They didn't necessarily talk every minute of every day, but when they did spend time together, it was easy. They could pick right back up. She could talk about real things. There was a naturalness to that friendship that she had been working so hard to create somewhere else. And I think there's something really important for our daughters in that. Closeness isn't always measured by constant access. Sometimes a girl can text you all day and you still don't feel deeply known by her. And sometimes you can go a while without seeing someone, sit down together, and feel like no time has passed. Neither one is automatically better, but as our daughters grow, they're learning something incredibly important. What does connection feel like to me? Not who am I supposed to be closest to? Not who have I known the longest? Not who has been my titled best friend or who has had the title of best friend, but who can I be myself with? Who shows up? Who am I able to show up for? Where does this friendship feel mutual? Who do I genuinely enjoy being around? And as her mom, you can help her notice that without choosing friends for her. Maybe you say, I've noticed you're really happy after you spend time with Maya, and then stop. Or you and Ava seem to be having a lot of fun together. You don't have to add, maybe she should be your best friend. Please don't. Because we're not trying to fill a vacancy. People aren't replacements for people. We're simply helping our daughters widen their view. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts we can give a girl when a friendship is changing. Permission to keep the door open in both directions. She doesn't necessarily have to slam the door on the old friendship, and she doesn't have to stand in that doorway waiting for it to become what it used to be either. She can keep living. She can keep connecting. She can accept an invitation. She can sit somewhere different. She can get to know the girl she always laughs with in science. She can invite someone new to do something. She can let a friendship surprise her. And maybe the old friendship finds its way back to a different kind of closeness. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it becomes a friendship that still matters but looks different. We don't have to know yet. Because I think sometimes we get so focused on helping our girls keep friendships that we forget about also teaching them how to grow relationships. And growing relationships requires openness. It requires noticing who is noticing you. It requires being willing to reach towards someone new too. And it requires understanding that making room for another friendship doesn't erase the one that came before it. Your daughter doesn't have to choose between, I still care about her, and I'm building something meaningful with someone else. She gets to hold both. And if you're watching your daughter go through this right now, I think that's where you can gently help. Not by finding her a replacement best friend, not by convincing her that she shouldn't care about the girl she's missing, but by reminding her, sometimes without even saying it, that her world is bigger than the one friendship that's changing. There are still people to know, relationships to deepen, places where she can show up as herself, and people who may already be reaching toward her. Help her notice them. Because sometimes the friendship that feels easy and natural isn't the one she's been trying desperately to hold on to. It's the one she finally gives herself permission to notice. And when I think back to all those years in the classroom and all those conversations I had with girls about friendship, I can still picture some of them sitting across from me. Two girls who cared about each other, both upset, both completely convinced that the other one didn't understand. One saying, but she's my best friend. And the other essentially saying, I know, but I want other friends too. And I would sit there helping them find words to say what they couldn't quite say on their own yet. And now, after so many years later of working with thousands of girls, I think about those conversations differently. Because at the time, it felt like I was helping them solve a recess problem. or a partner problem or a best friend problem. But really, they were learning how to be in relationships. They were learning that caring about someone doesn't mean you get to control them. That wanting more space doesn't mean you don't care. That wanting closeness isn't something to be ashamed of or afraid to say out loud. People can need different things from the same relationship, and that people only change when they want to. That sometimes you need to say, I miss you. Sometimes you need to say, that hurt me. Sometimes you need to listen when someone tells you they need more room. And sometimes you have to accept that a relationship you really value may not be able to give you everything you wish it could. Those are big lessons. And our girls are starting to learn them in friendships now. Which means that when your daughter comes home hurting because her best friend doesn't feel like her best friend anymore, I know how tempting it is to want to make it better. You remember this girl. You remember how happy your daughter was with her. Maybe you loved having her around too. Maybe you know her mom. Maybe there is a little part of you grieving what the friendship used to be. And you may want to reach into your daughter's life and put everything back where it was. But that's not really what she needs from you. She needs you beside her while she figures out what this friendship is becoming. Maybe it's going through a hard season and they find their way back to each other. Maybe they need an honest conversation. Maybe they remain friends, but the friendship isn't quite as close. Maybe they drift apart for a while and reconnect later. Maybe this relationship becomes something different than either of them expected. You don't have to know the ending yet, and neither does she. What you can do is help her learn to ask, what do I need from a close friendship? And am I able to be myself here? Is there room for both of us? Do I want to reach toward this person? Is she reaching toward me too? And maybe most importantly, am I trying to care for this friendship, or am I trying to convince someone to choose me? Because there is such an important difference. And if your daughter learns that difference now, she's learning something she'll carry into relationships the rest of her life. I don't want our girls to become afraid of caring deeply because someday a friendship might change. I don't want them thinking the answer is to walk away the minute a friendship gets hard. And I don't want them to believe that every person who needs something different from them, is a bad friend. I want our girls to know how to stay open-hearted without abandoning themselves, to reach toward people they care about, to have hard conversations when a relationship is worth fighting for, to give other people room to grow and change, to recognize when someone is meeting them halfway, and to know when they've been standing in the same place for too long, waiting for someone to come back and choose them. Because your daughter's worth was never determined by whether one particular girl called her best friend. It wasn't determined when they were inseparable, and it isn't determined now that something feels different. She's still worthy of deep friendship. She's still worthy of being known. She's still worthy of relationships where she can show up fully as herself. And there are going to be people throughout her life who meet her in different ways. Some may walk beside her for years. Some friendships may change shape. Some may surprise her. Some may circle back. And some of the people who eventually know her most may be people she hasn't even met yet. So if her best friend doesn't feel like her best friend anymore, you don't have to fix the friendships for her. And you don't have to tell her to let it all go. Help her see it clearly. Help her find the words for what she's feeling. Help her decide whether she wants to reach toward it. Help her notice what's coming back. And while she's doing that, help her keep her heart open to the people who are reaching toward her too. Because maybe the goal isn't to teach our daughters how to hold on to every friendship. And it certainly isn't to teach them how to walk away from every friendship that changes. Maybe it's to help them become girls who know how to build, nurture, and recognize relationships where both people have room to grow. And someday, when we're not sitting beside them, helping them figure out what to say, they'll know how to do it for themselves. And that's what we're really preparing them for. I know this is a long episode and a lot to process, but I hope it was helpful. And I'm here if you need me. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining another empowering episode of the Raising Confident Girls podcast. Share today's insights with caregivers and friends, building beautiful relationships with strong girls. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We're not just a podcast, we're a community. Follow Girls Positivity Club on social media for more empowering content on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. This podcast empowers you, supporting incredible girls. Let's create strong, beautiful relationships with the girls in our lives. I appreciate you listening today. Stay confident, stay connected. Until next time, keep raising those confident girls. You've got this.